measuring the wealth of the country and the growth of the GDP. So we see GDP is equals to what? We condense it to few variables because all the other variables will feed into that. We say it is consumption, this water I'm consuming, the clothes, the food you're eating here, the fuel. We say is GDP, you measure it using consumption, plus private investments, plus G. G is government. Government, G you can always substitute it to B. It is budget. What we read as budget is what is called G. And then plus net exports, which is, you put a bracket, X representing exports minus M representing imports. Reflect about that. Now, let's forget that we learned it in class. Just reflect now that you are already a CPA and an FCPA who is already working. Now, detach yourself from class now to a policy maker in your respective area. That what influences the economy is how we consume, plus how we invest, how we consume privately. Those are households and farms. Plus how we invest privately. Those are private investments. Plus then G, how the government spends money. Plus X minus M. What does that tell you? That all those variables are very important for an economy to grow. And we'll see how other economies have grown using those. So when you talk about growth of the economy, and you're still talking about deficit in our payments, trade with other countries, what are we really saying? When you talk about growth of GDP, and you are talking about decelerating private investments, what are we saying? Now that part we call G is what we look for and we look out to, all of us. How much is the budget? The GDP of many countries, the budget and the government expenditure only constitutes from around 17 to 25%. Can you imagine that?
Your email is your first online impression. Make it count. With GoDaddy Email, you get a professional address that matches your domain. It builds trust, boosts credibility, and helps grow your brand. Setup is quick, and your inbox is protected with built-in security. And if you ever need help, we're just a call away. Start building your brand, one email at a time.
Economy uses finished products, not intermediate ones. The other one is what? Income. Using the income approach, what do we measure with? Incomes. Can one of you just shout with a raise of hands kindly? Any kind of income you know about in the economy, or you as a person? Yes, my brother? Salary. Yes, that's called wages. That's good. Number two. Actually write that. That's part of it. Wages is the return of labor. Is what you are paid to offer your labor.
Interest income.
Interest income. Very good. Write that, by the way. You are already economists, you guys. Number three.
Farming income.
Farming income. That must be specific. You call it profit. Now, you don't call it farming income, call it profit. Remember, we are dealing with final incomes. So what you call now, the return of capital is called profit. So holistically call it profit. Even interest income is also part of it, what was said by my sister. The other one? Dividends. You can call it dividends, but it may form part of the profits. But just write it. Rent. Remember, rent is an income to the landlord. It's also a return of capital into some way. Any other? Let me see whether we've forgotten. Taxes. Tax is an income to government. Remember, government is also an agent of the economy. They receive, they expend. They are also part of the G up there. I hope you have gotten what I mean. The incomes, we measure the incomes received, we aggregate them. That is also a measure of how the GDP is performing. Even subsidies is an income to the recipient. When the government, for example, gives a Nuga subsidy, it's not the shopkeeper who is receiving the subsidy. It is you, the end consumer. So it becomes an income. Now, let's go to the final one, so that now I go to the main point. This is just the groundwork. The other one is called the production approach. And to me, this is usually the most important. And we'll dwell most of our points around this one. Production approach of the economy measures all the goods produced at the final level, but it segments them per sector. It segments those per sector. But there are only 3 sectors in this approach. One is called primary production. What is primary production? Primary production is anything in any sector that gives or produces commodities without any value adding. So one is agriculture. When you eat a mango, it is all natural. But when you take mango juice, it ceases to be the primary production. When you dig mchanga ya kujenga, that is also a resource. So to that extent, then, agriculture is one part of primary production. Mining is also part of primary production. Kwa sababu, just ukinunua mawe, simeshika? Ukinunua mawe ya darugo, nilikuwa nimesema hiyo kwa sababu watu wanasema mahiga ya darugo. Ukinunua mawe ya darugo, what are you buying? Have you ever asked yourself, you know why human beings sometimes we chase them, how we are creators? Just look at this house. What has a human being created in this house? Just ask yourself, mawe iliendewa darugo. So who created that mawe? It's not a human being. They just took, shaped it, and built. This wood over here, who created it? It's not a human being who created this wood. Even this down here is wooden. So if you actually look at it that way, you realize that nature is more sophisticated than us. So primary production, hiyo mawe, mchanga, is also part of mining. Fisheries is also primary production. Forestry is primary production. When you hear the government has removed moratorium on logging in forest, is also a part of the economy, primary production. Now, in Kenya, we call it agric. It's like agriculture, but it encompasses other things. Approximately, it accounts for 18% of our GDP. Please write there because we'll be interacting about that. Write it as a formula. GDP is equals primary production, then unaandika hapo chini what is primary production of the things I've listed. Then, the second part, plus, the second is called secondary production. Secondary production is manufacturing and the associated. So manufacturing, transport, storage, transport is not there, sorry. Manufacturing and anything around manufacturing. Value addition. Industry. That accounts for 17% of our GDP, approximately. Now, the last one, plus, is called tertiary. Tertiary accounts Tertiary is banking, insurance. All that you do, most of the CPAs, is in service because you offer your brain. The biggest resource for you in your office is not a vehicle, is not the building, it is you. So you're also part of this now. Banking, insurance, hospitality, that is tourism holistically. Transport is also part of it. Transport, there is a thin line. The part that there is a consumption of fuel in a daga industry. But where there is, in terms of service, it is in service. Storage, all that. Now, look at this now. All those things is a circle. It's the same thing I have said if you look at it, zoom it. Because I've talked about expenditure approach. Consumption plus investments plus government plus net imports. Then the other one, I've talked about incomes, income approach. Number one income is tax. But tax is the one that is government up there. The other approach that had government expenditure, and this is the other one that has tax, those one cancels out. Because tax is what becomes government expenditure. When you talk about profit down here, and anything else that is a return on capital is what becomes enhanced investment up there. What is wages in the income approach is what becomes consumption in the other expenditure approach. But they are important, and they'll be important as I make the point I want to make. So now that Kenya is where we are, let's say an economy of a GDP of 18 trillion shillings, approximately. Now, what are the low-lying fruits in those formulas that then can bring about the expansion of the left-hand side, which is the GDP? But let's look at some of the economies and how they have evolved so that we come now to Kenya. Now, if you look at the UK, the US, they started with what? They started with investments, but investments for what? Please get me, because in my opinion, I think if we crack this nut as Kenya, then there is so much we can do. They started by investments, growing investments. It's called capital accumulation. But after you accumulate capital, it is supposed to be used for what? When you accumulate capital, remember you are importing this capital as a growing economy. But I'm still in the UK, US, when they were growing. So when you import capital, these are machinery. Remember, this is an import. When you import a lot, you are damaging the economy because you're part of X minus M. So all manner of investment in manufacturing, how the US did it, the UK did it earlier, China, South Korea, and the rest. You must grow industry to stimulate net exports. If you only do manufacturing to satisfy local demand, that manufacturing actually usually have a damaging effect to a large extent to the economy. Because many times you realize the machinery you've imported to do what you are calling manufacturing may have costed you more than actually importing the finished product. In my master's in the University of Nairobi, I looked for data for Kenya for the last 40 years. And my topic was about primary production, manufacturing, and the GDP growth. So I had already concluded, like many of us here, manufacturing, it leads to economic growth. If I never did anything with data, that is what I could have written in my report. Now listen, I took data for the last 40 years for Kenya, tabulated all this data. This was the outcome. That the growth of manufacturing in Kenya for the last 40 years has led to decline in the GDP growth. Can you just imagine what I'm trying to say? It seems like, I'm sure you're asking yourself, what kind of paper is that? Let me repeat. The conclusion of the data was 1 unit growth in manufacturing leads to 8 unit decline in the GDP. How is that even possible? Because obviously we know manufacturing must always lead to economic growth. And I'm talking about their movements. The growth by 1 unit in manufacturing leads to a decline in 8 units in the GDP growth. That looks like an oxymoron. But now let's come back home. Na tulizane maswali hapa. In the last 40 years, has the economy of Kenya been growing or not? Don't fear, just raise up your hand. FCPA, yes, it has been growing. It's only few sessions we had a decline, like Corona time. Even over post-election violence, we had an increase, but it was marginal. Let me repeat, has the GDP in Kenya been growing for the last 40 years? Wacha ni kuniangalia namna hiyo. Has it been growing, yes or no? It has been growing, that is the truth. Okay. Has the manufacturing as a composition of GDP been growing or declining? Now that is where the answer lies. So, have you seen what I mean? For the last 40 years, the economy has been growing. But for the last 40 years, the composition of manufacturing as a share of GDP has been declining. Remember what I talked about, 17% secondary production is not just manufacturing. Manufacturing is part of it. If you remove manufacturing from the 17%, it is around 8%. Do you know, in the 60s, the composition of manufacturing as a share of GDP was higher than now. That is why. But these are the real reasons. What do we call manufacturing in Kenya? No. What do we call manufacturing? Kwanza wale wasuti.
In some cases, we refer to it as juakali.
Juakali, that's one. Now let's come to Kenya Association of Manufacturers. Is there anyone representing any company which is part of Kenya Association of Manufacturers here? Or anyone who knows about it? Just mention one company which is part of Kenya Association of Manufacturers. Mention one. Yes, my brother.
Bidco Oil Company.
Nyamazia hapo kwanza. Somebody to, I need the lady in green, please come. Tulisema hii si darasa. Wacha tujisomeshe hapa. Hapa. Somebody to give us a pen. And guys, I didn't come here to motivate you. I came here so that we keep thinking about Kenya critically. So write Bidco. You wanted to say the second one? Say the second one. Very good. Any other? Kenya Association of Manufacturers. I want you to give me who are the members. Yes? Yes, yes, sir.
I was mentioning KVM, Kenya Vehicle Manufacturers.
Very good. KVM, Kenya Vehicles Manufacturers. So we can put even Isuzu there. Is it? Yeah. Toyota Kenya. Let's put all of them there. Number 3.
Flour exporting companies.
Higher flour. Floriculture.
Yeah, floriculture. And even commercial properties.
Commercial properties. Let's first put that star. And I want us to reason together. Floriculture is primary production. We are dealing with manufacturers. Kenya Association of Manufacturers. But that's a good point. Put a star. It is not part of CAM. Yes, sir. Yeah, please Say it.
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola. Yes.
Mabati Limited.
Mabati, yeah?
Cement producing companies, Simba Cement and all the rest.
Weka cement producing companies. Did I hear Mabati? Put out a Mabati. So call it Mabati companies, all of them combined. All of them. The last one. EABL. Put it there. Very good. Now, wacha tunyamazie hapo kwanza. And I want us to be critical because manufacturing is what will help Kenya. But let's look at what do we actually call manufacturing. And if you collect the data I took is in public domain. Go take it, collect it. You see, for the last 40 years, has the growth, because the decline of manufacturing as a factor of GDP, if it's declining, then the GDP should be declining. But now we see they are inverse. That we agree the economy has been growing, but we also agree even with figures that the composition of manufacturing as a share of GDP has been declining. Number one, we talked about Bidco. Bidco and all edible oils companies, critically let's think, are they manufacturers? Think. Go back to the formula we talked about. GDP is equals to consumption plus investments plus government plus X minus M. So in that formula, Bidco, they do investment because they have machinery. But they also stimulate our consumption. We consume edible oils. But now go to X minus M. If you define let me not use a specific name. If you define edible oils companies in Kenya, are they manufacturing companies or are they importers? That is the point. Because if we continue deriding ourselves and lying to ourselves, we will continue doing the same thing, but expecting different results, which we are not going to get. We will have edible oils companies become manufacturing companies that help our economy if two things happen. They source or the intermediate, they source the intermediate product here. Intermediate means to make edible oils, whatever you need to make it, if it's not coming from Kenya, you are an importer. If 80% of a packet of edible oil when you buy it, if 80% of the cost you are paying is an import, then you are harming the economy more than you are stimulating it. That's one. But number two, they'll become truly manufacturing companies when they start manufacturing for other markets, not just for Kenya. Why is that important? So that the machinery they have imported to do whatever thing they are doing with edible oils, their value becomes less than the production you are making. So that you cover up for your net imports. You cover up for your net imports by exporting. So I wish they were importing these intermediate goods and products, manufacture edible oils, then sell them at a premium in the outside markets. But if you only produce for the local markets, and the bigger component is an import, that is the reason why there is no manufacturing. The ones you mentioned are not. KVM is not. Isuzu is not. Now look at it this way. When you go to Isuzu, I can use Isuzu because it's a public company. Government has a stake in it. If you go to Isuzu yard today, is it manufacturing that is happening there or is it assembly? Now, the value of assembly versus the value of what you imported, what is higher? The value you are adding to this part and this is only assembling them. Between that value of assembly and the value you accrued by these imports, which value is higher? It is import. So is that an import company or is it a manufacturing company? You may see it. I think those two examples suffices. That, as we talk about manufacturing in Kenya, let's now stop wearing suits and speaking big-worded English. Let us go to where the rubber meets the road and confront the problem there and then. If you go to a country like Morocco, Morocco is now overtaking South Africa as an auto economy in Africa. But they are doing real manufacturing. They are not just doing assembly. So those real manufacturing are important because you must be mindful when you are a Mabati company and you are importing iron ore. So what are you doing? Just compressing Mabati and selling. So we must, as a country, look at, if we are talking about manufacturing, it is actually real, but it also targets outside market so that you pay for your net imports. You pay for your net imports by also exporting. Hey, it's so much jargon today, lakini mutanisamehe. I'll highlight a few points as I go to the close. How do we enhance productivity as a country? But before that, so that this makes sense, those formulas I made you right. I talked about US. US grew by what? Starting by manufacturing. Manufacturing for what? Exports. UK had done exactly the same before. How did South Korea grow? South Korea came up with a model called export-led growth economy. The economy of South Korea grew on a model which is actually now studied, called export growth economic model. How did they conceptualize it? General Park was the president of South Korea from around 1961. Was actually a general, meaning you know how he took the power. But he was a good man. He minded about his country more than he minded about how much money he would make. And he actually was able to check where the problem of South Korea was and how it could be solved. And I'm using South Korea because the size of Kenya is exactly the size of South Korea in terms of population. We are in our 50 millions, both of us. But we were the same in terms of the economic GDP per capita. In the 1960s, we were the same. But now, currently, a South Korean is 12 times you. So if you earn 100,000, a South Korean income is times 12 of what you have. Is it an oil-producing company? No. Do they have rare earth minerals? Not more than Kenya. So what is this that they did? And how can Kenya do something related? They came up with export growth economic model, where the economy needed to grow not by producing for consumption, but producing for exports. General Park formed a committee which was meeting monthly to evaluate how the exports model or the exports figures are running in South Korea. And in the 19 years he was president of South Korea, he attended all those meetings personally. All. What was the ramification? The exports of South Korea grew by over 360 times. Then they went ahead to check, how can we grow this economy even further? What do we, because you can say, oh, we have a committee then to grow our exports. We must go deeper, specifics. So South Korean model, some people actually say South Korea grew on corruption. Corruption is defined by using policies to benefit private. South Korea was deliberate to the level where they combined private sector and government together for the sake of the economy. So they created a category of companies called chaebols. Chaebols were meant to be big exporters. And what was the basis? The basis was this. If we needed to have, or if we want to have a company that can compete globally, let's say in production of zips, or buttons, or ties, if we need that company in Kenya, it must be very high scalable. Because when you scale a company so high, so the cost of production per unit comes down. So South Korea thought that yes, we need to grow the economy. Everyone, SMEs, they are part of it. But we need some level of companies that can actually go out there and compete with the biggest companies in the world. So South Korea deliberately made policies, including funding policies, that benefited chaebols. The chaebols I'm talking about is a company like Samsung, a company like Hyundai. These companies, one was dealing with dried fish back then, but used the capital, used their profits to become capital to scale technology into other products. So the entire economy started by producing garments and apparels, high product, labor-intensive, pollutants. That's how all the economies grow. You must first adopt labor-intensive products, pollutants, what every other person is looking at to run away from. Even them, they grew from that. Garments, apparels, then they upgraded to plywoods. The plywood is an upgrade. But manufacturing for export, plywoods then came to what? If you look even when we were growing up, Sa, Nini, they were either Japan, South Korea, Chinese. With low quality, low technology, not low quality, low technology. Then the same company plows back the profits. Now Samsung, in the year 2024, their research and development budget was higher than our entire budget in Kenya, one company in South Korea. Why? Because the government helped them through policy, first of all, to adopt technology very fast, transition commodities and production to higher technology products, because higher technology products have higher margins, and higher margins have higher productivity per worker. China from 1976. You know, sometimes these stories are given and you might think, how is that so sudden? China was being ruled by Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong was a uniting factor. He made the Chinese people to be who they are in terms of the country. But during his reign, there was something called the Cultural Revolution, where he was trying socialism, at the people to go into the farm, at the farm, then the product belongs to government, at the munagawiwa kidogo. You know, that's not how the economy works. Economy works through selfish interest. So hapo hakaenda kobo kidogo. And it led to millions of Chinese people dying out of hunger. Then he departed from this world in 1976. In 2 years, there was some vikwazo hapo, the wife and some people called the Gang of Four. We are trying to subvert Deng Xiaoping from becoming president of China. But he succeeded in 1978. Now, this is what happened. One day, Deng Xiaoping was visiting Singapore, and he was astounded to see that homes had fridge. He went back to China, at the normal home has a fridge. Just imagine. Then, after he went back to China, he remodeled the Chinese economy. First of all, he opened it up. After opening up, he now started the same model of South Korea. Labor intensive, kwanza. So, China also got something called adoption. It's like copying, so to say. So they could see a technology happening somewhere, no need of R&D, no need of tiring your mind. There is this shirt, start manufacturing that shirt. This tie, they studied it, start manufacturing exactly it. Why? Their labor was cheap. So this company manufacturing a tie maybe somewhere in England, China would produce exactly the same tie by adopting other people's technology and then produce more ties and actually make those companies they borrow the technology. Because you move from low production, from labor intensive, you still on productivity. Remember, productivity of a country is the summation of my productivity and yours and the other person. And what is productivity? You may even measure it through income. I don't know whether I'm being too fast. If you go to the formula I gave you about the production formula of GDP, service industry accounts for 65% of our economy because 18 plus 17 is 35. What remains is 65. But this agriculture of 18%, the primary production, is employing over 70% of the entire rural population in Kenya. What does that mean? 18% of the GDP carrying 70% of the rural population. It means the productivity is too low per person. So to grow the bigger cake, then grow the smaller cakes down there of per person. So I'm coming back to China, but I am attaching all of them. So China, South Korea, start with labor intensive. But labor intensive are associated with low wages, low productivity per worker. But you have no choice by then, because you are dealing with one, a social problem, which is unemployment, but you're also dealing with an economic one. We need to grow. So labor intensive industries expand job opportunities. So you solve a social problem. But because the labor is cheap, your products become more competitive. But after that, the same China we know, 20 years ago, they were taking this type, producing it. But now, gentlemen, within a short time, the economy lands. Not just copying and adopting other people's technology. They start now inviting other people who want to manufacture in China. So you go there as an EV company. One of the things you have to sign is that you'll be sharing your research and development to the government. Your findings of R&D can be accessible to government. But there is no bigger whale than that. So companies go there because they think China is very robust in terms of the size. They establish companies, but the guys are intelligent. They are just taking up research, development. Now the reverse happens. Now the China we are talking about today, guys, they have the largest EV manufacturer in the world. Not using other people's technology. Their technology is higher than the Western technology in terms of EVs. Their batteries are higher technology than the ones Tesla is using. Their production per vehicle is more efficient than the one Tesla is making. Within a very short span of time, an economy moves from low productivity, labor-intensive sectors, upgrades to higher technology ones. Now they are at the apex. As I talk to you now, the rare ads that are meant for AI, China knew that over 12 years ago. They came up with a policy. Now the entire world realized last year that the entire rare earth in the world, China in their pocket, they have 70% of that. That's why you see, like the US tries to bulldoze China by some tariffs. Xi Jinping doesn't even call a press conference. He does only one thing. He regulates the imports, not even the exports. He regulates who buys their rare earths. Then after some time, diplomatically, the superpower of the world has to call China on a round table. Moving from low technology, labor intensive, up the ladder, up to the apex. So, in my opinion, Kenya, we still need a lot of labor intensive industries. And these points I will not overemphasize. So I don't want to take not more than 10 minutes to wind up. Kenya, in my opinion, unemployment, there is a difference. Forget about the figures we report called unemployment. Unemployment may deceive you. There's a difference between unemployment and joblessness. There is a word that gets reported is called unemployment. But remember, the definition of unemployment is somebody who has not earned anything for the last 4 weeks, and somebody who has not actively looked for a job for the past few weeks also. But remember, joblessness includes the people who already did that for years, they gave up. That's the biggest in Kenya. So we still have a big problem with joblessness. So we still need a lot of labor-intensive industries. But these labor-intensive industries must not necessarily be in primary production, because we will be trapped in a low-level equilibrium. A farmer in Kenya currently, whatever kind of farming you do, you are trapped in a low-level equilibrium. You will never break even in terms of breaking the ceiling to get wealthy until you upgrade to adding value to your own produce, either alone or as a cooperative. Because it doesn't matter, even if you have 1,000 acres, 10,000 acres, the margins in farming are still too low, and the labor that is needed is still too low, and the dependence on weather is still too high for you to scale. So you still farm, yes, but you farm knowing it's not the head. There has to be another head. There is something called capital accumulation. All the economies we aspire to be like, and there is one I am avoiding to mention because I don't want us to boggle this discussion with those political semantics. There's one country that I would really have wanted to give an example with here, but I'm avoiding it. You know it. Capital accumulation, the reason you guys, you see me talk about shares all the time, and NSE, is because I believe, to a large extent, the economic break in Kenya, NSE has a very big role to play. A developing market has a huge role to play to manufacturing, has a huge role to play in advanced service and technology. How? If you look at all those type balls I talked about South Korea, yes, internal resources were there because the government policy was deliberate. Come to China. At your own time, Google the largest companies in China and check who were their investors when they started. You realize one thing. All the countries that have grown in our generation have grown using other people's technology and money. Something called capital flow is critical and very important. That country I'm not mentioning because it has been politicized in Kenya so much, yet it's a very innocent, good country. If you go to their securities, to their stock market, called SGX, you realize the top 10 companies that are listed there, yes, the government is very dominant, but most of those companies developed and grew using other people's money. Other people's, I don't mean locals, I mean outside money. BYD is currently the largest EV manufacturer in the world. Who are the manufacturers at the early point when they really needed capital? It's Berkshire Hathaway. Who owns Berkshire Hathaway? Warren Buffett from the US. If you go to, you check in your free time, Alibaba, you check all those big tech companies. Capital flow is a critical element. Why do you think the US dominates us so much? the capital markets in the US on the stock side alone is bigger than...
Oh, a lamp.
Stop it, I'm ticklish. You have released me, Aladdin. In return, I'll grant you 3 wishes.
I'd like to be as smart as a fox, as strong as a bear, and fly like an eagle.
Oh, flying too. Then you need Red Bull, the energy drink.
Red Bull gives you wings! Bye-bye, Genie!
Oh, and who grants me wishes?
You stay here.
We need to alleviate poverty, and we need to uplift so many Kenyans out of poverty. That thing is technology. I don't need to gainsay the point I talked about labor intensive. Labor intensive is the lowest technological adoption level. Then you go to skill intensive industry. After skill intensive, you usually go to capital intensive. After capital intensive, you go to technology intensive. Is it a coincidence that all the largest companies in China are now technology companies? That all the Forbes list billionaires, top 50, they are all technology companies. And technology doesn't just mean IT. Technology means, for example, if you talk about Dangote and the refinery he built the other day in Nigeria. To me, as much as that is manufacturing, is also technology. You are adopting new ways. More efficient ways of producing more cheaply. Let me just read you some statistics here because I don't want to take more time. There's a company called Ndindi. I'm sure you have heard about it, manufacturing AI chips. Their research and development budget for the year 2025, R&D budget, was 12 billion US dollars, which is 1.5 trillion Kenya shillings. One company, not the entire cost, their R&D, research and development. And I want to read from 3 different economies. In 2024, BYD, sisi tunajua ni kampuni ya gari. So we expect that the expenditure should be about windscreen, batteries, and etc. The expenditure on R&D in 2024 was 7 billion US dollars, which is 900 billion Kenya shillings. Samsung, the one I talked about, their R&D budget in 2025, listen to this, was 25 billion US dollars. Which is 3.2 trillion. Our entire budget, as Kenya, almost, was one company's research and development budget. That should trigger us on why are they doing this? Because productivity is enhanced by technology. Any company that does not invest in R&D, what you do is to lag behind, or then you remain mundane. Your production becomes archaic. The same you bring it to the economy. So these are the points I just highlight. You can interact with them later. How I think we can reshape the future of some sectors in Kenya. One, of course, is high-targeted manufacturing. High-targeted manufacturing, high-productivity manufacturing. That can only happen again through capital flows that are unrestricted. Number 2, is deliberately fostering entrepreneurial spirit. The biggest problem Kenya has and has been having for years is patronage stifling entrepreneurship. Patronage, that the biggest employer in Kenya becomes the politically, the occupants of political positions. And because they are not entrepreneurs, So what are they doing? We allocate capital where it should not be. Because when you become a politipreneur, the money you get, the profits you get becomes possessions. But economies grow when you convert possessions and wealth into capital. A normal entrepreneur, that's how they think. You start a bank called Equity. A normal entrepreneur, how do you think? On how you can scale it. So when you make money, you actually plow it back. Before we know, you've expanded to Tanzania. You've expanded to Burundi. You've expanded to any other place. You are a Dagote. You may be held by policy, that's fine, but you are an entrepreneur. You wake up in the morning to think about creating. So what does Dagote do? You manufacture, you start with importing fertilizer, you make money. After making money, you set up a fertilizer company. Then you go to oil import. Then you make money, you set up a refinery. You see the sequence. This person is using their profit, not as possessions. Maybe in their bank account, maybe hata hawana pesa. But they are using this possession, this wealth, as capital to generate. But when money falls in the hands that are not entrepreneurial, the wealth becomes possessions. And when we do politipreneurship, when you are already not an entrepreneur, you not think like one. So you'll make money, stack in the banks, stack it in sacks for a rainy day politically. But this money, if it was in the better hands of an entrepreneur, this person would have made this 1 billion, they would already be setting up a factory to add value onto sweet potatoes to export to some other countries, employing 1,000 people. So that's how now this distorts economic incentives. When money falls where it should be, it becomes capital, and capital stimulates, and capital become a hub of disease. Why? Because Kenya has a nice story of selling green energy, which is abundant. But what stifles, nini huwa inanyonga economy ya Kenya when it comes to power? We go back again, patronage. When we talk about production of power in Kenya, it's Kengen. It has maybe over 70% of market share. The other people are called private power producers. Tell me any of your uncles who do that. Or your village mate who do private power production and they sell to Kenya Power. Tell me one you know. Who you frequent with in a normal restaurant. One. That since independence, private power production is a reserve of people who serve in government at the highest places. And then they set our electricity price. Because Kenya is based on something called take or pay. Which is conceptually was a good thing to make power, to make private sector invest in power. Take and pay is what? I signed something called a PPA. PPA is an agreement that I'll be producing 100 megawatts of power. And I'm selling to you. And you either take or pay. Initially, it was good to make me see value for my capital. But we need to liberalize generation of power in Kenya. It is better we have power we don't know where to take than have a deficiency in power in Kenya. Because all the other variables will be determined by how much capacity of power we have. Generative AI consumes around 8 times power than normal search engine. Generative AI, the one we all use here, generative, Gen AI, ile unauliza maswali. They use 8 times power, the background of it, than the one normal search engine like Google. 8 times. So it means the demand for power globally now has only one direction. One direction called headed north. Going high, going up. And this is not likely to change. And our government policy must be so deliberate now that let's liberalize these PPA things. That ukiingia in power hivi, the best way to secure your future is to sign a PPA with Kenya Power, with arbitrators based in London, so that even if any other government comes and they want to revise these terms, their heads, their legs are tied. So we can continue paying political rent even after the occupiers of the office are long gone. And then we continue triangulating our own economy. We must liberalize power production in Kenya. Let's produce so much power. These rows we have, after you produce these megawatts, you have to sell to Kenya Power. No, we break it down. If an industry needs 50 megawatts, let them produce without selling to anyone. They use it. Because you're already deficient in power. We produce as much power as possible. And we become a center of disease because we have a nice story we can sell. We can even tell Microsoft, we can tell Meta, Amazon, and all the rest, we give you land. We also give you resources. Produce your own electricity. Set up your DCs here. Those terms will benefit Kenya better than just sitting around with 3,000 megawatts of power, an economy of over 50 million, and you're talking about manufacturing. Which one? One dam called Grand Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia. One. They are producing over 5,000 megawatts of power, selling to all of us around. And they're in the process of making another one of 3,000. Let me tell you guys, tutakuwa tunasoma Ethiopia kwa gazeti. Why should we make this happen when you have the opportunity to change the fortunes for Kenya now and in the future? We must break these PPA things and we liberalize power production because power is the biggest handicap that Kenya has in terms of production. And my opinion on power again, because I've been thinking about it. By the way, sometimes I wake up at night to think about Kenya in some sectors. And I write down some points because they disturb me. Take a company like Kengen. The government of Kenya owns 70% of Kengen. Is it 60 or 70? I think 70. What's the value of Kengen? If you bought Kengen today, the entire value is 63 billion shillings. 63. Kengen will be yours. But they are producing, let's say, close to 2,000 megawatts. Ethiopia, Nigeria, there are two companies that I would love giving examples with because they are listed. One company is called Geregu Power. They are producing less than half of what Kengen is producing. But their market valuation is 200 billion Kenya shillings. There's another one called Transcorp Power. They produce less than half what Kengen is producing. But their value is 200 billion Kenya shillings. Meaning Kengen, if we got a strategic investor, we could value Kengen at more than 350 billion Kenya shillings. We don't need to invest 1 shilling in the budget. We need a strategic investor, comes with money, the government sits part of the 70%, remains with only 35%, value it correctly at 350 billion, all this money can come and produce double the capacity we have in Kenya. We will have spent no money, we will have generated much more energy than we need, and the more you produce, the less the uptake cost and price. And then we make our economy much better, much more recipient to anyone who would want to invest in a place that has abundant power. Very lastly, outside of the things I was doing, I think today I'm not to talk about shares. I talked about them last time. Just keep on investing in the areas that are important, not just land. Since we met in Mombasa, the reason I'm not talking about shares, that day Kenya Power, for example, was trading at 12 shillings. It is today trading at 18. I know some of you I talked to who actually bought that day, because I mentioned, when we met in Mombasa, Equity Bank was then trading at around 60. Today it is 74 shillings. I'm not mentioning them to tell you to go and buy them. I'm mentioning to you so that you go and evaluate the companies listed in the NSC. NSC is still very undervalued. There are still very many opportunities in the NSC. Please, take advantage of such things, which you don't need to tire your mind too much. One afternoon is enough. You analyze, you make your decisions, you buy. And after you buy, the exit is quite simple. When you need money, you have it. Not just like the static wealth that we accumulate. I continue to say, as I told you last time, Safaricom is undervalued the way we are selling it, because I've told you the market is undervalued in Kenya. And we are doing a mistake as Kenya to sell Safaricom for 34 shillings. Last Friday, Safaricom was trading in the market at 34.25. Government has to revisit this transaction. And Vodacom, which is the parent of the buyers buying Safaricom, if there is any deal you have done with any government official, which is making Kenya lose over 100 billion, you are going to take the burden. The directors of Vodacom, I said, I'm waiting to see their response. Because I'll give Kenyans their phone numbers. If government cannot speak for us in the sale of Safaricom, Kenyans will directly speak to the directors of Vodacom, including the chairman and the CEO. Because there is no way I'll be here as an MP and as a leader. I have experience in the stock market. I know people are taking advantage of Kenya, and people tell me, oh, for political decency, you can't do that. Political decency when Kenya is losing 100 billion. What's Icpak? Are you getting me, my brothers and sisters? We have to do the right thing. If we get 100 billion more, Kenya builds more roads, we generate more electricity, and we lower the cost of education, Kenya becomes better. Education is my very, very last point. I told you, Kiharu, we are paying 500 shillings per term. I have been in my previous position. I know 100% Kenya is capable of offering free basic education, not tomorrow, today. Kenya has that capacity. And I'm saying several constituencies have already shown we are already doing it. And we are not throwing this ball to anyone. My proposal has been simple. NGCDF of Kiharu, like any other constituency, we started at 30 million shillings every constituency from our CDF. That will be 10 billion shillings. The counties, they also started at 10 billion out of the equitable share. And the national government, they may suspend renovating the offices every year. We raise 10 billion shillings. We need 30 billion shillings to make education in the senior secondary schools free and totally free, including the lunch program. So what is making Kenya to postpone such a program? I'm waiting for the budget making time. This is not an issue that requires a bill. It requires intervention at the budget level. We make this available. We provide quality education to Kenyans, and let it be. And as we continue expanding our infrastructure, the road and the rest, my request is one, as I sit. The government expanding roads is good, is even long overdue. But it must not be